What you are seeing here is the Star Wars launch bay at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World at Orlando, Florida. A walkthrough exhibition that serves as both a museum where guests can find props, models, and costumes used in the Star Wars films, a meet and greet area to meet up with characters from the franchise, a theater to show a short film about the legacy of Star Wars, and a shop to get some cool Star Wars stuff. However, little do people know as they walk in the rooms filled with Star Wars memorabilia, they're standing in a historical place where some of the most memorable moments in Disney animation were actually created. It was where Ariel brought out her colors with her red hair and green fin. It was where Belle was a guest and treated with a dinner and show. It was where Simba just couldn't wait to be king. And it was where Mulan, Stitch, and Kenai had their adventures to make their big screen debut. Yes, believe it or not, the Star Wars launch bay used to be the home of a fully functioning animation studio that fans knew it best as the magic of Disney animation. While many are most familiar with the legendary works that was done in California over the decades, there was a period where not only the animators were helping out by making their own magic in Florida, but guests had a chance to also see the magic being made before their very eyes. Not to mention that they contributed to what are now some of the biggest and most beloved animated features of all time. But how come the studio in Disney's Hollywood Studios did not last long? Why was Walt Disney World's contribution to animation short-lived? This is the story of a little complex that was a combination of an animation studio and a theme park attraction that was stuck between two landscapes that rely on never-ending changes in order to survive both the theme park industry and the animation industry. However, even if it did not last long, it did make the most out of its time by contributing to some of the most well-known moments in Disney history. So what happened to the magic of Disney animation? Well, let's find out. But first, to talk about the origins of this attraction, we gotta look into how Disney's Hollywood Studios all started. Or should I say, Disney-mgm Studios. It all began when Walt Disney Imagineering were planning on expansions for the newly opened Epcot back in the early 1980s. One of the proposed pavilions to add onto Future World was one dedicated to entertainment, featuring an attraction where guests enter into some of the greatest scenes in movie history. A great movie ride, if you will. The Imagineers and the heads at Disney loved the idea so much that instead of building it at Epcot, they wanted to give Walt Disney World an entire third theme park dedicated to it, where not just the ride, but the entire area itself would be dedicated to the art of filmmaking. So in 1986, Disney's new CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, not only approved the project, but also made the team build the park as fast as possible, especially when Universal Studios stated that they wanted to make a new theme park in Orlando, and managed to get the job done and opened the new park on May 1st, 1989. Unlike either the Magic Kingdom or Epcot, Disney-mgm Studios wasn't just a theme park, but it also served as a fully functioning studio where productions could actually film their features and series, and guests could get a glimpse at them come to life at the sound stages and even a backlot tour. Technically, Universal did call Disney out for ripping them off, since that's exactly what they do at Universal Studios Hollywood, but nothing ever came out of that outside of just some complaining. Anyways, back in Disney-mgm's beginnings, they had several notable projects that were actually filmed within the theme parks, including movies like Ernest Saves Christmas, Passenger 57 starring Wesley Snipes, and the cult favorite musical Newsies, and TV shows like The New Mickey Mouse Club, Adventures in Wonderland, and The Golden Girls. However, unlike Universal, Disney also built an entire area where guests could witness another form of filmmaking that is entirely different than what they could find either in the backlot or at the soundstage. Animation. As we all know, animation is the core of the Walt Disney Company, and if they would be dedicating a theme park to movies and making movies, especially theirs, then I think it would make sense that they would feature an entire section to their animated films. And so, on the same day as the park's opening, Disney opened the Magic of Disney Animation, a special walkthrough tour that taught guests how animators create their cartoons and animated features. Developed by BRC Imagination Arts, workers had to start their jobs even before the building was done to make sure they correctly blend the facility as both a walkthrough attraction and a functioning studio. Through the guest perspective, they started by watching an exclusive short film called Back to Neverland, where Walter Cronkite shows Robin Williams each step that goes into making an animated film by turning Robin into one of the Lost Boys from Peter Pan. Following that, they walk down a hallway with glass windows where they actually see firsthand the animators at work providing the animation for what was the next big Disney animated feature. Think of it like a zoo, but with animators. All that's missing was just a little vending machine where the kids could just put in a coin to go and feed the animators some treats while they pet them. And finally, they watch another short film that is a montage of many great moments in Disney animated films, walking out to a little area featuring production cells from their classic films and a display showing replicas of some of Walt Disney's Oscars. As for the studio side of the place, they started small by only doing some cartoons and finishing touches on the features like the Roger Rabbit shorts Roller Coaster Rabbit and Trail Mix-Up and the ink and paint work on The Little Mermaid. But by time, they started to get a little more involved with the preceding animated films, since the studio's main purpose was to help accomplish the Burbank team's goal of releasing one animated feature a year as they began to grow more ambitious than the last. And coincidentally, they got to work on what some would later become the most legendary animated features ever made. On top of animating some scenes for these films, the Florida team was credited to animate the Be Our Guest number in Beauty and the Beast, the CG hand-drawn hybrid short called Off His Rockers, and the I Just Can't Wait to Be King number in The Lion King. This also included additional minutes of animation for movies like The Rescuers Down Under, Aladdin, Pocahontas, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Also, throughout its time, there have been many well-known animators that have worked at the studio, including Mark Henn, Barry Cook, Tony and Tom Bancroft, Chris Sanders, Dean DeBlois, Andreas Deja, Ruben Aquino, Aaron Blaze, Robert Walker, Byron Howard, and so much more. But then, at the end of 1993, the executives were quite impressed with the works that they've done so far and decided to let them push their capabilities even further by letting them make their own animated feature by themselves. During production, Disney geared up the studio even further to be more than prepared for creating their own features. What started as a little studio with around 40 to 50 workers, in 1997, the company turned it into a major animation house with a new 4-story building and adding in 400 animators to the team. And so, after years of development, the Florida studio finally released the first animated feature made in Walt Disney World, Mulan, which turned out to be a solid hit. In fact, it did so well that it actually performed better than its predecessors. After The Lion King, it was noticeable that Disney Animation started to lose a bit of steam, where Pocahontas, Hunchback, and Hercules were not only getting less money than the films from the early 1990s, but even critics were not as fond of them as the classics. But then when Mulan made her debut on June 19, 1998, it did pretty well at the box office with $120 million domestically and $304 million worldwide, and the reviews turned out to be quite positive with critics really enjoying the film. So by doing so well to the point of even exceeding the films done in Burbank, the Florida studio officially solidified itself as a top animation house capable of making animated features worthy of the Disney name. From there, the Florida team kept doing what they do best with assisting the Burbank studio on movies like Tarzan, The Emperor's New Groove, and Atlantis: The Lost Empire, and made their own animated short released in 2000 based on the legend of John Henry. But once again, while some were working on those side jobs, most of the crew was busy developing another animated feature with a big goal in mind: to be like Dumbo and share its big heart. That, and to be as cheap as Dumbo 2, because seriously, these animated films were starting to get real expensive for Disney. Anyways, the result of this was Lilo and Stitch, released on June 21st, 2002. It was pretty good at the box office, with $145.8 million domestically and a worldwide total of $273.1 million, but it was through the reviews and the massive sales on merchandising that made Stitch a real Disney star and turned his movie into one of Disney's most prominent franchises at the time. But the most significant part about its success is that it was the animated hit that Disney needed at the time, especially when Atlantis turned out to be a disappointing flop. It might sound crazy, but even if the one in Burbank counted as the main studio, the Florida house became the superior studio, where the movies they were making surpassed the Burbank films both critically and financially. This was exactly the motivation they needed when they were working on their next feature, which was originally intended by Michael Eisner as a North American version of The Lion King with bears that the team created to become Brother Bear. On its release on November 1st, 2003, at best, it did okay. The box office was fine, as it made $85.3 million domestically and $250.4 million worldwide, but it was nowhere near the critical nor the commercial success of Lilo and Stitch. While it might have been of a bummer that they've underperformed compared to the last film, something even worse happened not long after. The whole thing shut down! Not long after the release of Brother Bear, Disney Animation reached a new low point in its history. Roy E. Disney, the chairman of Feature Animation and Walt's nephew, resigned from the company to get Michael Eisner kicked out, and their movies were becoming major failures to the point of losing a substantial amount of money, like Treasure Planet and Home on the Range. As a result, on January 12, 2004, the company decided to close down the Florida studio as part of the big plan to convert the main animation division to only develop computer animated films. Since CG features were growing more mainstream and becoming a lot more successful because of studios like Pixar and DreamWorks. There was one more feature that they were working on at the time that went through many names. You've probably heard of it as either My People's, Angel and Her No Good Sister, A Few Good Ghosts, or whatever, but it was a hand-drawn CG hybrid helmed by one of the directors of Mulan, Barry Cook, that was supposed to be a Romeo and Juliet style story with bluegrass music and a cast that featured Dolly Parton, Charles Durning, Hal Holbrook, and Lily Tomlin. However, because of the shutdown and some creative differences that caused more problems, the project was ultimately scrapped. As for the hundreds of animators that worked there, they were either unfortunately laid off or moved to the main studio in Burbank to keep making animated features there. Going back to the attraction itself, while my research couldn't confirm an exact date of when this happened, they stated that it was most likely around this time after they closed the studio part, where they gave the area a massive update. Instead of the Back to Neverland short, they replaced it with a special show where a live presenter shows guests how Disney characters are made with the help of Mushu. This would then lead to an interactive area where the guests could meet the characters of the latest animated film they released, learn how to draw one of the popular characters, and see concept art for their next animated film. But even with those, the attraction was starting to become a bit of a shell of its former self. The windows where people could see the artists at work were rarely used and looked more like untouched replicas of an animator's office. But then on July 12, 2015, the entirety of the magic of Disney Animation officially shut its doors and was quickly replaced 4 months later with the Star Wars launch bay, which is the same thing as before, but now Star Wars themed, just in time for their contribution to make its debut, starting with The Force Awakens. By the way, may I mention that the launch bay is partly responsible for making the layout of Disney's Hollywood studios kind of awkward? Seriously, in this one theme park alone, as of this video, there is not one, not two, but 3 randomly placed Star Wars themed areas. Yes, we get it, Disney. You own Lucasfilm. Good for you. You don't have to remind us literally every time we turn a corner. I'm just saying that it looks weird when your Disney park got Star Tours and Galaxy's Edge sandwiching the Muppets. Although this is somehow not the first time we've seen this happen. Overall, the magic of Disney animation came in at the best and the worst time possible. As both a studio and an attraction, it came at the best time where, even if they didn't know it at the time, guests were witnessing history literally being made as they saw the development of some of the greatest animated films of all time, like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King, and some of Disney's biggest fan favorites like Mulan and Lilo and Stitch. But also, it was at the worst time when, quickly after they peaked in the mid-1990s, they were losing popularity and money due to the newfound trend of computer animation, resulting in Disney to adapt and make some major sacrifices along the way, including the whole studio side of the place. As for the attraction element, it kept on going for a little over a decade, but with the only updates they made were just to accommodate the latest animated film and a glimpse at the upcoming ones, it was inevitable that Disney would make something entirely different there, especially in a theme park that went through so many changes over the years that there are currently no opening day attractions that are currently operating anymore. But during that moment, even if the studio itself lasted for almost 15 years, it was Disney's biggest tribute to the process of animation and the hundreds of artists that made them. While guests were already familiar with these movies, the area was meant to give them a newfound appreciation of how they were made, even to the point of showing them firsthand the animators at work. Also, it was a key component to the original idea of Disney's Hollywood Studios, or Disney-mgm Studios, where the theme park is meant to present Disney's vision of what is the art of filmmaking. And with the magic of Disney animation, that was supposed to represent how animation was an integral part of Disney's movie-making business. Nowadays, not many people realize the amount of history that was made when looking through the Star Wars stuff at the launch bay, but there was a time within those corridors that magic was being made.
And that's the way it is.